So, have you ever felt totally disconnected from the political decisions that actually shape your daily life? Well, if you have, you are for sure not alone. Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're exploring a deeply fascinating framework from author Zakaria Ali Rashidi, and it attempts to explain exactly why so many of us feel this profound disconnect. We're going to unpack the historical evolution of civic power, strip away some of the illusions of modern governance, and literally look at how we might rebuild a more authentic system based on the source's provocative ideas. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for dismantling and rebuilding the concept of civic power. 1. Origins of the word. 2. Three faces of democracy. 3. The elective oligarchy. 4. The 5 new powers. 5. Towards an authentic democracy. And finally, 6. Ethics and power. Let's get right to it. Section 1. At the origins of the word. To really understand where we are right now, we kind of have to establish a historical baseline. The etymology here is actually super simple and undeniable. The word democracy comes from ancient Greek. You've got demos, meaning the people, and kratos, meaning power. You put them together, and it literally translates to the power of the people. It's supposed to be a system where sovereignty fundamentally, completely belongs to the citizens. I want you to keep this really simple, direct definition in the back of your mind, because it creates this wild contrast with the incredibly complex and, honestly, indirect modern systems we're about to look at. Section 2. Three faces of democracy. Now, to grasp our current system's limitations, the source asks us to compare it directly with historical alternatives. And what's really interesting here is the stark contrast. In our modern representative system, citizens delegate their power, right? We vote every 4 or 5 years, and elected officials make the actual decisions for us. But look at the Athenian model. Back in 5th century BC Athens, citizens directly participated in the assembly. And here's a fun fact. To stop a permanent political elite from forming, they actually used this massive stone lottery machine called a claritarian to literally randomly select citizens for office. How wild is that? And then you have direct democracy, which you still see bits of in places like Switzerland today, where citizens themselves make decisions through regular referendums. So the jump from the active, everyday rule of ancient citizens to the delegated, passive power of modern voters, it's a massive shift. Section 3. The elective oligarchy. This historical contrast perfectly sets up the author's primary and, I'd say, pretty provocative thesis. The quote is, "We live in an elective oligarchy. A small number governs, legitimized by the vote." Wow, okay, that is a heavy statement. But think about your own experience for a second. You step into a voting booth once every few years, and then, well, you basically go back to being a political spectator. The author argues that because we only participate passively, our system functions way more like an oligarchy, which is ruled by a small elite, than a true democracy. The idea here is that just slapping a vote on this small ruling group doesn't actually make the people sovereign. It just kind of gives us the illusion of it. Section 4. The 5 new powers. This naturally leads to an absolutely crucial question. If we, the people, don't actually hold the power, who does? Who's pulling the levers behind the curtain today? Well, we all learned about the traditional powers in civics class: executive, legislative, and judicial. We're taught they balance each other out perfectly. But the source argues that framework is completely outdated. Instead, we have these real modern powers dictating our lives: monetary, media, energy, food, and technological. The core argument here is that true sovereignty is just impossible if these 5 massive sectors operate totally outside of democratic control. Let's break down exactly how the source views these 5 unelected sectors. First up, monetary power. Private central banks essentially control the money supply and debt. Then, media. Massive corporate consolidation means a tiny handful of entities control the narratives that shape public opinion. Third, energy. The infrastructure gets built with our public tax dollars, yet the massive profits stay private while your utility bills keep going up. Fourth is food. Agro-monopolies completely dominate what we eat. I mean, think about the skyrocketing prices at the grocery store and how that impacts our health. And finally, tech. Private giants use algorithms that literally influence your behavior and manipulate your attention every single time you pick up your phone. According to the text, these 5 forces run your daily reality way more than any elected official ever could. So the radical takeaway from the author is this: our democracy is fundamentally broken, or at least incomplete, until these 5 essential domains are brought back under collective democratic control. It's a perspective saying we have to move way beyond just voting for politicians and start actually democratizing the fundamental resources that keep society running. Section 5. Towards an Authentic Democracy. Now, don't worry, the source doesn't just leave us with a bleak critique. It actually offers a really interesting roadmap to rebuild. The author proposes a new civic architecture with 5 steps to turn us from spectators into active participants. 1. A hybrid democracy that mixes traditional elections with regular citizen initiatives. 2. Modern sortition. We'll unpack that in just a second. 3. Revocable mandates. This is huge, meaning you could legally recall or fire an elected official midterm if they completely break their promises. 4. Mandatory transparency in public spending and lobbying. And 5. Using AI strictly as an assisting tool to help everyday citizens parse through complex legislation, definitely not as a decision maker. I want to zoom in on step 2 real quick, modern sortition, or drawing by lot. This is that direct revival of the ancient Athenian practice we talked about. Imagine a citizen assembly selected completely randomly, kind of like jury duty, but they actually hold real binding legislative power. Because everyday citizens rotate in and out rapidly, it completely prevents the system from being captured by a permanent elite. I mean, think about it. You literally can't spend millions lobbying a politician for years if the lawmakers are just random citizens who go back to their day jobs after 6 months. The source presents this as a highly practical, almost uncorruptible cure for the political gridlock we see today. Section 6. Ethics and Power. But here's the thing, structural changes just aren't enough on their own. And this brings us to the final philosophical core of this explainer, the relationship between the systems we build and the values we hold. The foundational belief here is that true power isn't just about controlling systems, or hoarding wealth, or mastering the newest tech. It's about aligning all of those things with a solid moral compass. Power without ethics is fundamentally unstable. If we build incredibly complex financial and technological systems, but completely lack the ethical framework to distribute that value fairly, well, that society is eventually going to collapse under the weight of its own inequality. Therefore, as a society, we have to master our values, not just our tools. The foundations of ethical power require us to first deeply understand our reality and history. Then we have to actively define our collective values, distribute power equitably instead of hoarding it, and finally, act with systemic coherence. That basically means our economic pursuit of infinite growth shouldn't be actively destroying the exact ecological systems we actually rely on to survive. Which leaves us with the ultimate question raised by this whole explainer. In an era completely dominated by global finance, algorithmic tech giants, and entrenched political elites, how do we make the people truly sovereign in a complex world? It's a massive challenge, and it requires us to stop being just passive consumers of politics and start becoming active architects of our collective future. Think about your own role in that future. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the systems around you.